Sunday afternoon, April 27th, 2025. A mechanic's shop in Forest Park, Georgia. Between 150 and 200 bikers had gathered for what appeared to be a routine motorcycle meet. Engines rumbled, conversations filled the air, and nothing seemed out of place. Then gunshots shattered the calm. Multiple rounds were fired in rapid succession. Panic spread instantly. Bikers fled the scene at high speed, racing away in every direction. When police finally forced their way through the chaos, they discovered 2 men dead at the scene and 2 others critically wounded. This was not a random act of violence. Investigators quickly determined it was a calculated attack. One outlaw motorcycle gang targeting another in a territorial conflict that had been building for months. By the time the investigation unfolded, authorities had exposed a deadly rivalry between 2 of the most dangerous outlaw motorcycle gangs in the United States. This is the story of what happened when the outcast motorcycle gang came looking for blood. At 4:59 p.m. on April the 27th, 2025, Forest Park Police received multiple 911 calls reporting shots fired at 5246 Jones Road, near Old Dixie Highway and 1st Street. The location was officially listed as a mechanic's shop, but that Sunday it was hosting a gathering of the Wheels of Soul Motorcycle Club. When officers arrived, they encountered total disorder. Motorcycles were speeding away in every direction as riders attempted to escape before they could be identified. Police had to push through a crowd estimated at between 100 and 150 people just to reach the victims. Inside the commercial property, officers found a violent crime scene. 2 men were dead, 2 others had been shot and were in critical condition. Officers immediately rendered life-saving aid until Forest Park Fire and Emergency Services arrived. The 2 men killed were identified as Anthony Hearns, 39, of Philadelphia, and Isaiah Mack, 25. Both were members of the Wheels of Soul Motorcycle Club, a Philadelphia-based outlaw motorcycle gang attempting to establish a presence in Georgia. The 2 wounded men were rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Investigators would later determine that they were not innocent bystanders. They were the attackers, members of the rival outcast motorcycle gang who had come to the event with the intent to kill. Forest Park Police Chief Brandon Criss held a press conference the following day, April 28th. His message was direct and uncompromising. "What happened yesterday is not only tragic," Criss said. "It is an affront to everything we stand for in Forest Park. Those responsible for this violence will be found, prosecuted, and removed from our community." Criss emphasized that Forest Park, a city of approximately 20,000 residents located just south of Atlanta, would not tolerate gang violence. "Forest Park is not a playground for lawlessness," he said. "If you bring violence here, we will use every legal tool available to hold you accountable." The investigation quickly expanded beyond local authorities. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives joined the case, along with the Clayton County Sheriff's Office. Investigators began reviewing surveillance footage, collecting ballistic evidence, and interviewing witnesses. Authorities also discovered that the property hosting the gathering was operating without a valid business license. City code enforcement immediately intervened to ensure the site would not be used for future events. For 10 days, investigators worked around the clock to reconstruct what happened. They reviewed hours of surveillance footage from nearby businesses and analyzed shell casings recovered from the scene. Witness interviews proved difficult, as many individuals were initially unwilling to cooperate. The major break came when investigators identified the 2 men who had been transported to the hospital with gunshot wounds. Evidence revealed that their injuries were sustained during return fire from the victims. Both men were members of the Outcast motorcycle gang. On May 7, 2025, Forest Park Police held another press conference. They announced charges against two suspects, Donald McKnight, known by the gang alias 1HQ, and Nigel Blackwood, known as Railroad. Both men were charged with malice murder and violations of the Georgia Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. McKnight was already in custody. Blackwood, however, remained on the run. Later that same day, in a dramatic moment captured by local news cameras, Blackwood turned himself in to Forest Park Police. He was visibly injured, wearing bandages beneath his clothing and appearing to be in significant pain from his gunshot wounds. Chief Chris explained the motive behind the shooting. Investigators believe this attack was driven by a dispute over territory, he said. Both groups were attempting to establish themselves in Georgia. The Wheels of Soul Motorcycle Club, based in Philadelphia, had been expanding south and attempting to build a presence in Georgia. The Outcast motorcycle gang, which already had 4 chapters in the state, viewed that move as a direct threat. The shooting at the mechanics shop was intended to send a clear message. Georgia was already claimed territory. Police made it clear that the investigation was far from over. Additional arrests were expected as detectives continued identifying individuals connected to the attack. In August 2025, authorities charged a third suspect. Marvin Judge was arrested and charged with felony murder and violation of the Georgia Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. Like the others, Judge was identified as a member of the Outcast motorcycle gang. According to investigators, all 3 men arrived at the Wheels of Soul gathering together with the intent to attack rival gang members. McKnight and Blackwood carried out the shooting, while Judge played a supporting role. To understand why this violence occurred, it is necessary to understand the Outcast motorcycle gang itself. Founded in 1967 in Detroit, Michigan, the Outcast motorcycle gang is considered a one-percenter outlaw motorcycle gang operating outside the law. Its second chapter was formed in Atlanta, and the organization has since expanded to 67 chapters across the United States. Georgia alone is home to 4 Outcast chapters located in Atlanta, Augusta, Hawkinsville, and Savannah. Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr has described the gang as an organization known to engage in a wide range of criminal activity, including murder, assault, and drug and weapons trafficking. The Outcast motorcycle gang operates with a strict hierarchical structure, featuring national leadership and local chapter officers, such as presidents and vice presidents. Its criminal history in Georgia is extensive. In June 2023, Attorney General Carr announced the largest motorcycle gang indictment in the state's history. 16 alleged members of the Southeast Georgia chapter were charged with dozens of crimes stemming from a violent incident at Flaco's House Bar and Grill and a nearby Red Roof Inn in Richmond Hill. The Forest Park shooting was not an isolated act of violence. It was the latest chapter in an ongoing territorial war between outlaw motorcycle gangs willing to kill to protect their influence. What began as a motorcycle meet ended as a deadly reminder of how quickly organized gang rivalries can erupt into bloodshed. Members of the Outcast motorcycle gang allegedly surrounded a motel where members of the Chosen Few motorcycle club had gathered. For months, Outcast members had tracked and intimidated the Chosen Few, confronting them repeatedly and warning them to stay out of Outcast-controlled territory. The conflict escalated when Outcast chapter president Milan Do Work Aiken allegedly followed 8 Chosen Few members who had stopped at a restaurant. When those riders later checked into a nearby Red Roof Inn, Aiken is accused of calling other Outcast members to surround the building and hold their rivals at gunpoint. According to investigators, the outcasts demanded that the chosen few surrender their motorcycle vests, a deeply humiliating act in outlaw motorcycle culture that symbolizes total defeat. Gunfire soon erupted. The investigation into the incident, known as Operation Patronus, lasted 13 months and involved multiple law enforcement agencies, including the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and numerous local police departments. Authorities executed more than 40 search warrants across southeast Georgia, seizing approximately $180,000 in cash and 71 firearms. However, territorial violence is only one part of the outcast motorcycle gang's criminal activity. In September 2023, Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr announced that Jerome McGriff Jr., known as Lil Savage, an alleged member of the Atlanta chapter, had been indicted on charges of human trafficking for sexual servitude. According to prosecutors, McGriff recruited at least 3 women for sexual exploitation and used his status as a gang enforcer to threaten victims with violence. Authorities allege that the gang profited directly from the trafficking operation. In May 2023, the Augusta chapter of the Outcast gang was involved in another deadly confrontation, this time with the Thug Riders motorcycle gang. 2 people were killed: 51-year-old Jermaine Farrell of Daytona, Florida, and 30-year-old Keith Coates of Valdosta, Georgia. 4 others were wounded, but survived. The pattern is unmistakable. Law enforcement describes the Outcast motorcycle gang as a violent criminal organization that relies on intimidation, assault, and murder to maintain control over what it considers its territory. The victims in the Forest Park shooting belong to another dangerous organization, the Wheels of Soul Motorcycle Club. Founded in 1967 in Philadelphia by a man known as Coffee, the Wheels of Soul began as a social motorcycle club in the early 1970s before evolving into an outlaw motorcycle gang. The club's mother chapter remains in Philadelphia, but it has expanded to at least 25 states and Puerto Rico. The Wheels of Soul claim to be the largest mixed-race outlaw motorcycle club in the United States, with an estimated membership of around 400. While racially diverse, the majority of members are African American. Members wear vests displaying patches that indicate rank and status within the organization. Federal prosecutors have stated that members who achieve diamond status and are designated as 1%ers are often the most violent and criminally active. Federal authorities classify the Wheels of Soul as a violent gang. The U.S. Department of Justice has stated that members generate income through robberies and drug trafficking, particularly crack cocaine, but also heroin. Their criminal activities include murder, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, racketeering, extortion, and assault. The gang has a long history of violent conflicts with rival organizations, including the Outcast Motorcycle Club, Sin City Titans, Hell's Lovers Motorcycle Club, and the Street Soldiers. On November 22, 1979, Wheels of Soul members were involved in a shootout with the Ghetto Riders gang during a high school football game at Woodrow Wilson High School in Camden, New Jersey. 19 people were injured. In 2009, after the Philadelphia chapter allegedly declared open season on the Sin City Titans, a Wheels of Soul member shot and killed a Sin City Titans member in St. Louis, Missouri. In January 2011, members traveled from Colorado to East St. Louis, Illinois, with plans to murder members of the Outcast motorcycle gang. The attack was not carried out due to police presence. Later that year, the FBI raided the Wheels of Soul clubhouse in West Philadelphia, leading to racketeering charges against 18 members. By the end of 2012, 15 members had pleaded guilty, while the remaining 7 were convicted after trial. On January 29, 2013, a confrontation inside a cycle gear store in North Charleston, South Carolina, escalated into a shootout. The president of the Real Kings Motorcycle Club and 2 Wheels of Soul members were killed. As recently as July 2025, FBI agents raided 2 Wheels of Soul properties in West Philadelphia in connection with a violent April 2025 incident at the Babylon Cafe in Woodbridge, Virginia. During that attack, a man was forcibly removed, beaten, and shot. More than 80 rounds were fired in the parking lot, and 19 individuals were arrested or sought by authorities. The Forest Park shooting was not an isolated event. It was part of a broader territorial war between the Outcast motorcycle gang and the Wheels of Soul Motorcycle Club. Forest Park Police Chief Brandon Criss explained that the conflict stemmed from territory disputes. The Outcast gang, which maintains 4 chapters in Georgia, considers the state its domain. When the Philadelphia-based Wheels of Soul attempted to establish a presence in Georgia, the Outcasts viewed it as an invasion. The rivalry between the 2 gangs stretches back more than a decade. Federal prosecutors alleged in 2011 that Wheels of Soul members conspired to kill Outcast members in Illinois. The 2013 South Carolina shooting was triggered in part by a victim wearing an Outcast support patch. When these 2 organizations cross paths, violence frequently follows. The Forest Park shooting fits this long-standing pattern. What makes these conflicts especially dangerous is the gang's willingness to engage in gun violence in crowded public spaces. The Forest Park attack occurred during daylight hours with up to 200 people present. A similar incident in Richmond Hill in 2022 took place in a hotel parking lot surrounded by businesses. The Forest Park shooting exposed the deadly reality of outlaw motorcycle gang warfare in Georgia. Anthony Hearns and Isaiah Mack lost their lives not because of personal actions, but because they wore the wrong patches in the wrong place. 3 members of the Outcast motorcycle gang now face murder charges and violations of Georgia's Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. If convicted, they face life in prison. Police have indicated that additional arrests are likely. Attorney General Chris Carr's Gang Prosecution Unit continues targeting outlaw motorcycle gangs statewide. Since its formation in 2022, the unit has indicted dozens of alleged gang members across Georgia. Despite these efforts, the violence continues. Both gangs remain active, and territorial disputes persist. For the families of the victims, there is no resolution, only permanent loss. For Forest Park residents, there is the lasting reality that their city became the site of a brutal gang conflict. The cases against Donald McKnight, Nigel Blackwood, and Marvin Judge are ongoing. All are presumed innocent until proven guilty. However, investigators say the evidence points to a premeditated attack that revealed the brutal nature of motorcycle gang warfare in America.